People throughout history have looked at Christians and they said, what has happened inside of them to make them so generous? Why are they so different than everybody else who's basically operating as though it's a cutthroat world that you have to step on others in order to get ahead? Nobody had ever seen anything like it before. Nobody could figure it out. How is it that they can do this, they said? Verse 13, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ. Right? That is contained within this whole statement that he's making on giving, on stewardship. And Paul is saying, if you're radically generous, people will know that they are touched by God and they will glorify God because what you have actually done is an actual confession of the gospel. That's the impact of your generosity. And so as you and I joyfully give to what God is doing through his church, when we're generous in every way, to use Paul's language, that brings glory to God. Because a Christian recognizes the generosity already inherent in their faith. Paul said earlier, don't give out of compulsion. Don't give like that. Make sure you have the right motivation to give. And if compulsion is your motivation to give, don't. Because God loves a cheerful giver, a hilarious giver. Because that's the Greek word, hilarion, from which we get our word hilarious. So when you decide that it doesn't matter what you receive back, it doesn't matter whether or not you know how it was used, when you just give to somebody, and I can tell you, I could give you story after story after story of people in this congregation who have privately given to a need that they knew about, and they said, don't tell them. And that's why I can't tell you who did it. And then I watch the blessing of these people as they experience God's blessing in their life that was given anonymously because somebody just wanted the joy of being able to say, I helped them. It's a beautiful thing. And you can have that joyful generosity when you come to see that God owns it all anyways. Everything we have comes from him. That's what we looked at last week with Malachi. The very breath in our lungs comes from him. The beat of our heart all comes from him, and he gives it cheerfully to us. We've talked in previous sermons. Why is there beauty? It doesn't have to be. Why is there chocolate? It doesn't have to be. God created this weird plant in this jungle and said someday they're going to discover this and they are going to love it. Right? He isn't under any obligation. God is sovereign over all things. And so therefore, he is not under any obligation to make things fun or beautiful or pleasurable. And yet, if we're truly honest, there's a lot of it in our lives. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of pleasure in our lives. He gives all of that to us for the sheer pleasure of giving it to us. Do you see his heart? His heart is a joyful giver. And he loves it when we follow his model and we give cheerfully, when we're genuinely glad to do it. See, God could compel you to give. I mean, he's sovereign. We just said that. And so he could pull anything he wants out of you. He could. You would be like me playing basketball with a third grader. He could do that to you, dominate you completely. He could. But he desires, now let me check that. He loves a cheerful heart in giving because that's his heart. And so when he has a cheerful giver, instead of using his sovereignty to pull things out of you, he gets to use his sovereignty like this, verse 8, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency, that satisfaction, by the way, in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest for your righteousness. It does not say that he's going to increase the seed and the bounty for your hoarding. It never says that. It says he will increase the seed for your sowing. See, God can supply all that you can give away. He can. So Paul is saying the reason you can confidently give away your wealth is because all the wealth you have is from God anyway, and he supplied it once. There's no reason to think that he can't supply it again. Will he? I don't know, but it's sure going to be fun to find out, isn't it? And if you say, no, that won't be fun at all, maybe we've got a little inkling about something that's going on in your heart. So this is what God does. He comes to you in the scriptures and he says, I've given you everything you have. How about sharing a part of that to take care of some of the needs of the people around you? Can you imagine if God were to come to you directly in person and say, hey, gave you this house, just wondering if whether or not you could, maybe use one of the rooms to put up somebody in the church because they're really hurting and they're suffering and they don't have a place to stay. And you said, what? No, this is my house. Yeah, he'd be like that doctor at the beginning. He'd cock his eyebrow and he'd say, I don't think you understand how all this works. You're kidding, right? You've got to be kidding. So this is the background that led John to write in 1 John 3. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Again, John is not trying to compel anybody to do this. He's just asking a simple question. If you have the heart of God, how could you see the world's needs and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to help. Now, we can certainly feel overwhelmed. I understand that. That's not what I'm talking about. But we do have to do battle with our natural heart. We do have to do battle with it. We have to recognize whenever we have what is essentially the heart of a little child who says, that's mine. You ever been to a preschool class where kids are learning for the first time how to share? Cubbies? If you need to be commanded to give, if you've never experienced the grace of God, well, that's something that you got to work out. You got to figure out in your own life. If, on the other hand, you want to give generously, that's one of the few proofs that you have that you really have experienced the grace of God. It's an external proof that we can all see. Well, you're not supposed to be making a judgment. I'm not making a judgment about you. I'm just saying we can see the proof. And it brings us joy, and we give thanks to God for it. God says, if you'll trust me and cheerfully give to what I'm doing, I can bless what your heart leads you to do. That's where God works abundantly. He's not twisting arms and breaking kneecaps. The grace of the gospel works spiritually and physically when we take part in passing it forward. Now, the best example that I can think of this is actually Zacchaeus. Remember Zacchaeus? He was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Did you go to Sunday school class? All right. He wasn't just little. He was also a tax collector, all right? The tax collector often defrauded just about everybody they came into contact with in those days. But he experiences redemption in a very tangible way when Jesus says, I'm going to show you how much you are valued to me. I want to go have dinner at your house. He invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house. And in his house, Zacchaeus comes back to Jesus and he says, behold, Lord, half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, which is just super funny, if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. See, that's the response of a person who has experienced grace in their own life. It changed him. Suddenly he realized, I'm accepted by God, and I can do things. I can give my resources now, instead of out of obligation, which is what the temple tax was, I can now give my resources out of gratitude for what God has already given me, which in Zacchaeus' life was quite a lot. But you see, a moralist, a person who's trying to reach God through their good works, which is what religion tells us that we have to do, says, I have worked hard, I have been a good person, God owes me for my sacrifices that I've already made. That's why religion is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about relationship. Do you see the difference? There's no joy in that, but there is joy in a relationship. So when you see that what Jesus has done for you, it changes your attitude toward everything that you have. All of your possessions now become something that can be used for Christ and not for yourself. And if that doesn't make sense to you, then I'll just say this. If that doesn't make any sense, if you're like that, you're speaking a whole different language to me right now, Pastor. I get that. So here's what I'm gonna suggest this to you. If right now you're offended by what I'm saying, I want you to just stop thinking about money. Even though I'm talking about money, I just want you to take all the focus off of that, right? For the time being. Sometime down the road, we're going to come back to this and we're going to revisit it again. But what I want you instead to focus on is your relationship with Jesus Christ. Because that has to be straight first. Focus on your relationship with Jesus Christ. If that relationship is right, all of the rest of this is going to fall into line. It will, I promise you. But if you find trouble in freely giving, then you really don't have your relationship with Christ straight. And I'm not saying that as any measure of judgment whatsoever. I'm just telling you what your heart is telling you. Your relationship with Jesus Christ is not straight. So focus on that. Don't focus on the giving. That'll come.